The heavy brass centerpiece connected with my temple with a sickening metallic thud, and my vision instantly dissolved into fractured shards of white light. As my knees buckled onto the polished marble floor of my own sister's wedding reception, my father's furious, sweat-glistening face was the last thing I saw before the darkness took me. But as I went under, the last thing I heard wasn't my family screaming for an ambulance. It was the frantic screech of the microphone being ripped from its stand. I thought that blunt force trauma was the worst thing that would happen to me that night, but the secret my sister's fiance was about to blast through the venue's speakers would change everything forever. My name is Logan, and for my entire life, I was the one who had to hold the Vance family together. I grew up believing that family comes first, no matter what. My father, Richard, hammered that rule into my head since I was a little kid. He always told me that blood is thicker than water and that we protect our own. But looking back, I realized that rule only applied to me. You see, I have a younger sister named Chloe. In our house, Chloe was treated like a fragile piece of glass. She never had to face the real world, she never had to work, and she never had to take responsibility for anything. If Chloe wanted something, Richard made sure she got it, even if it meant taking it away from me. I was always the strong one, the older brother who was expected to smile, suffer in silence, and give up my own dreams whenever my family needed a handout. For years, I played that role perfectly. I thought being a good son meant being a doormat. Richard ran a real estate firm, and to the outside world, we looked like a wealthy, high-society family. He wore expensive suits, drove luxury cars, and lived in a massive house. But it was all a fake show. Behind closed doors, our family was built on a foundation of lies, control, and endless pressure. While Richard spent money like water to maintain his fake reputation, I was quietly working myself to the bone, trying to build a real life of my own, away from his shadow. I never expected that the very family I tried so hard to support would look at me not as a human being, but as a bank account they could just rob whenever they pleased. To escape my father's control, I knew I needed to be completely independent. For 6 long years, I lived a life most people my age would hate. I worked 80-hour weeks as a structural engineer. While my friends were going out, traveling, and partying, I was sitting at a desk or standing on dusty construction sites. I saved every single dollar I could. I didn't buy fancy clothes, and I didn't drive a nice car. I had one goal in mind: freedom. By the time I turned 28, I had saved exactly $430,000. It wasn't luck, and it wasn't a gift from my father. It was my blood, sweat, and tears. With that money, I bought a small, rocky piece of land in Malibu. It was on a cliff overlooking the ocean, totally neglected and covered in weeds. But to me, it was paradise. Because hiring a full construction crew in California is incredibly expensive, I decided to build my dream house myself. For 2 years, my weekends were spent swinging hammers, pouring concrete, and running electrical wires. I built a modern 3-bedroom beach house from scratch, completely with my own 2 hands. Every nail in that house represented a night I didn't sleep, a vacation I didn't take, and a sacrifice I willingly made. It became my sanctuary. When the stress of my family became too much, I would drive out to Malibu, sit on my deck, listen to the waves, and finally feel at peace. Meanwhile, back at home, the illusion of my father's wealth was starting to crack, though I didn't know it yet. My sister Chloe had met a guy named Julian. Julian came from a genuinely wealthy, high-society family. When they got engaged, Richard immediately stepped in to organize the wedding. He wanted to show off. He planned a massive, over-the-top wedding at a luxury venue that cost a staggering $90,000. Chloe, of course, didn't care about the price tag because she wasn't paying for it. She just wanted her fairy tale day. I was happy for my sister, and I even offered to help with some minor expenses, but I kept my personal finances completely separate from Richard's business. I knew how he operated, and I didn't want him anywhere near my money. My Malibu house was under my name, paid for in full, and guarded like my life depended on it. I thought that as long as I kept my distance and protected my assets, their drama couldn't touch me. I had no idea that my father had already looked at my beautiful beach house and decided it belonged to him. The day of the wedding arrived, and the luxury venue looked like something out of a movie. There were massive flower arrangements, expensive crystal glasses, and 200 of the town's richest people walking around in tuxedos and designer dresses. I wore my best suit, determined to just be a supportive brother for Chloe, even though the fake smiles in the room were already making me uncomfortable. About an hour before the ceremony was supposed to start, I walked down the quiet hallway to the bridal suite to check on Chloe and wish her luck. But as soon as I opened the heavy wooden door, the happy wedding atmosphere completely died. Chloe was sitting on the sofa, looking nervous, and my father, Richard, was pacing back and forth with a dark, intense look on his face. He didn't even look up to greet me. Instead, he walked straight over, locked the door behind me, and shoved a thick stack of legal papers directly into my chest. I looked down. It was a quitclaim deed. He wanted me to legally sign over my Malibu beach house to Chloe as a wedding gift. I laughed, thinking it was a sick joke. "Are you insane?" I asked him. "I built that house with my own hands. It's my home. I'm not giving it away to anyone." That's when Richard's face turned bright red, and his polite, high society mask completely slipped. He grabbed my arm, his grip tightly squeezing my wrist. "You don't understand, Logan," he hissed, his voice shaking with a terrifying rage. "You are going to sign these papers right now, or this entire family is ruined." He then confessed the disgusting truth. His real estate firm wasn't just struggling, it was completely bankrupt. He had embezzled the entire $90,000 for Chloe's wedding from his clients' accounts, and he owed hundreds of thousands of dollars to private lenders. To make sure Julian's wealthy family went through with the marriage, Richard had lied to them. He had promised Julian's parents that Chloe was bringing a $500,000 Malibu property into the marriage as an asset. He had used my house as collateral to keep his own lies alive. "If you don't sign this, Julian's family will find out I have nothing, and they will cancel the wedding today," Richard yelled, shoving a pen into my hand. Chloe just sat there, crying, nodding her head and whispering, "Please, Logan, just do it for me. Don't ruin my big day." I felt a cold wave of disgust wash over me. "No," I said, dropping the pen on the floor. "I am not paying for your fraud, Dad. I am leaving." As I turned around to unlock the door, I heard Chloe scream. I started to turn my head back, but it was too late. Richard had completely snapped. He grabbed a heavy, solid brass floral centerpiece from the vanity table and swung it with all his strength directly at my head. The heavy metal connected with my temple with a sickening wet thud. A blinding flash of white light exploded behind my eyes, and my knees instantly gave out. I hit the floor hard, my vision fading into darkness. As I lay there, dizzy and bleeding onto the carpet, the door was suddenly kicked open. Through the blurry haze, I saw Julian stand in the doorway, staring in absolute horror at what my father had just done. But instead of calling for help, Julian looked at the papers on the floor, realized what was happening, and walked out toward the main ballroom with a look of pure fury on his face. When my eyes finally forced themselves open, the world was spinning. A hot, sticky trail of blood was leaking down the side of my face, soaking into the collar of my dress shirt. I tried to stand, but my legs felt like jelly, and a sharp, stabbing pain shot through my skull. The bridal suite was empty. The door was wide open, and from down the hall, a strange, heavy silence hung over the grand ballroom. I grabbed a linen napkin from the table, pressing it tightly against my bleeding temple, and stumbled out into the hallway. As I reached the entrance of the ballroom, I saw a scene I will never forget. 200 guests in expensive suits and gowns were sitting in dead silence. Nobody was eating. Nobody was talking. At the front of the room, Julian was standing at the center stage. He had ripped the microphone from its stand. His face was pale with disgust, and his hands were shaking with pure anger. My father and Chloe were standing near the stage, their faces completely white, looking like two ghosts. Julian didn't use the microphone to talk about the assault. He used it to blow their entire world apart. He looked directly at the crowd and began reading from a digital folder on his tablet. He exposed every single financial lie Richard had told over the past year. He announced to the entire high society crowd that Richard's firm was completely bankrupt, that the wedding funds were embezzled, and that my father had tried to bribe his family by fraudulently promising them a Malibu beach house he didn't own. "I am not marrying into a family of thieves, liars, and abusers," Julian's voice echoed through the speakers. He dropped the microphone onto the floor with a loud, deafening screech, walked off the stage, and marched straight out of the venue. His entire family got up and followed him. The wedding was officially over. Chaos broke out. Guests started whispering and rushing for the exits. I stumbled into the room, leaning against a pillar just to stay upright. When Chloe saw me, she didn't run over to check on my bleeding head. She didn't ask if I needed an ambulance. Instead, she lifted her heavy wedding dress, ran straight toward me, and began screaming at the top of her lungs. "This is all your fault," she yelled, tears ruining her expensive makeup. "If you had just signed the papers, Julian would have never checked the records. You ruined my life over a stupid house." Richard walked up behind her. He didn't look sorry at all. He looked down at me with cold, dead eyes and whispered, "If you call the police about this little accident, I will make sure the family completely erases you. You will have nothing left." As I stood there, bleeding, listening to my sister blame me for her ruined wedding and my father threaten me after trying to crack my skull open, something inside me changed forever. The sad, broken son who always wanted their approval died right there on that marble floor. The tears stopped. The pain in my head turned into a cold, calculated focus. I looked at both of them and realized they weren't my family. They were just parasites. I wiped the blood from my face, turned around, and walked out into the night. It was time to show them what happens when the doormat finally stands up. I didn't go home, and I didn't hide. I drove straight to the nearest police precinct, my hands gripping the steering wheel with cold determination. The desk sergeant took one look at my bleeding head and immediately called for a forensic photographer. I sat under the bright fluorescent lights, letting them document the deep gash on my temple, and handed over my medical report confirming a severe concussion. I gave the detective a full statement and told them exactly where to find the venue's security cameras, which captured Richard swinging that heavy brass centerpiece at my head. I pressed full felony assault charges before the night was over. The next morning, I went to work on the financial side of things. I called Julian. He was angry at my father, but he felt terrible about what had happened to me. We met at a quiet coffee shop, and he handed over a digital drive containing every text message, email, and forged document Richard had sent his family over the past 6 months. Julian's family had done a deep background check on Richard when things started looking suspicious, and they had all the receipts. I took that information and hired a forensic accountant to audit my own credit and files. What we found made my stomach turn. Richard hadn't just tried to steal my house. He had already stolen my identity. 2 years ago, he had used my social security number and forged my signature to co-sign a hidden $150,000 business loan for his failing firm. I didn't hesitate for a single second. I walked into the bank, filed a federal identity theft report, and froze the loan account. This immediately triggered an automatic bank audit on all of Richard's remaining shell companies, locking his accounts and alerting federal investigators. My final move was personal. For the last 3 years, I had been quietly paying the mortgage on a small city condo where Chloe and Richard lived. The property was entirely in my name. I had simply let them stay there because Richard claimed he was facing a temporary cash flow problem. I called a local real estate lawyer, drafted the legal paperwork, and had a process server deliver an official, unconditional 72-hour eviction notice directly to the condo. When Chloe called me, sobbing and screaming into the phone that they had nowhere to go, I didn't yell. I didn't get angry. I simply said, "You have 3 days to pack your things," and hung up. I blocked both of their numbers. For years, they had drained my energy, my money, and my peace. Now, I was cutting the power cord completely, leaving them to sit in the dark house of cards they had built. The final breakdown happened on a cold Tuesday morning in a small county courtroom. I sat in the second row, my head completely clear, watching as Richard was led inside. The expensive tailored suits were gone, replaced by a standard gray jumpsuit. He looked small, broken, and completely stripped of his fake high society pride. the judge didn't show him an ounce of mercy. Because of the federal identity theft report I filed, the bank audit had uncovered a massive web of grand larceny and financial fraud across his entire business. Combined with the undeniable security footage of him hitting me with the brass centerpiece, the evidence was overwhelming. Richard took a plea deal to avoid a longer trial, and the judge sentenced him to a mandatory 3 years in a state penitentiary, followed by complete liquidation of his remaining assets to pay back his victims. Chloe sat in the back corner of the courtroom, crying silently into her hands. The wealthy friends who used to fill her social circle were nowhere to be found. They had completely abandoned her the moment the scandal went public. With the condo evicted and no money left to her name, she was forced to move into a tiny, cheap one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, finally looking for a minimum wage job just to buy groceries. She tried to catch my eye as I stood up to leave, looking for a shred of the old brother who used to fix all her problems. I looked right through her, turned my back, and walked out of the building. True peace doesn't mean fixing relationships that are meant to be broken. It means having the courage to walk away from the people who only love you for what they can take from you. Tonight, I am sitting out on the wooden deck of my Malibu beach house. The air is cool, the sky is completely clear, and I can hear the steady, calming sound of the ocean waves crashing against the rocks below. The small scar on my temple has completely healed, and for the first time in my life, the air feels light. I built this house from scratch with my own 2 hands, and now, out here in the quiet, I am finally building a real life of my own.